This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by SpyCloud. Stolen data circulating on the criminal underground is fuel for data breaches, account takeover, ransomware attacks, and online fraud. Your biggest security risk might be a breach or malware infection outside of your control that exposes the data of your users. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data sourced from the dark web that power solutions that proactively protect over 3 billion employees and consumer accounts worldwide. Learn how to make recaptured data your best defense at spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. Data's been stolen from a U.S. defense industrial base organization. There's a major side-loading cryptojacking campaign in progress. Nord Stream and threats to critical infrastructure. U.S. Cyber Command describes hunt-forward missions in Ukraine. Andrew Hammond from SpyCast speaks with hacker Eric Escobar about the overlap of traditional intelligence and cybersecurity. Our guest is AJ Nash from ZeroFox with an update on the current threat landscape. And fraud meets romance. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency released a report yesterday detailing Alert AA22-277A. From November 2021 through January 2022, CISA uncovered activity from likely multiple advanced persistent threat groups on a defense industrial base sector organization's enterprise network. The organization affected isn't named in the report. The APTs used Impacket, an open-source toolkit to gain access, and then used custom data exfiltration tool Covalent Stealer to steal sensitive data. In this case, as BleepingComputer notes, CISA did not indicate who was behind the APTs. CISA says, during incident response activities, CISA uncovered that likely multiple APT groups compromised the organization's network, and some APT actors had long-term access to the environment. The agency reports that some APTs may have gained access to the victim's Microsoft Exchange server as early as mid-January 2021. BleepingComputer reports that they used the HyperBro remote access Trojan and well over a dozen China Chopper web shell samples on the organization's network, as well as exploiting the proxy logon collection of Microsoft Exchange server vulnerabilities. CISA has published separately a detailed analysis of both Covalent Stealer and HyperBro, the set of tools that figured prominently in the exploitation. Bitdefender researchers say they've detected a significant cryptojacking campaign in the wild. It's a sideloading campaign and represents an evolution in criminal cryptojacking technique. Bitdefender explains, this is the case of an active cryptojacking campaign that uses a dynamic library link hijacking vulnerability in OneDrive to achieve persistence and run undetected on infected devices. Cryptojacking, should the term be new to you, is the criminal practice of installing an altcoin miner on someone else's non-cooperating device, where it operates quietly in the background, hogging electricity and other resources to mine coin on behalf of those who installed it. The kinetic sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic region remains under investigation. NATO has formally designated the incident sabotage, but it's primly refrained from calling out a perpetrator until the investigation is complete. That said, many others consider the incident a shot across Western bows as winter approaches, a threat to take down energy infrastructure at a time when it will be most needed in the Northern Hemisphere. A Washington Post editorial makes a representative argument stating, "This is the kind of capability usually wielded by a state actor. Though NATO did not say officially what everyone suspects unofficially, the author of this strike against Europe's stability and security was Russia. The Post goes on to point out the cyber threat to infrastructure, stating, "In April, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, along with the FBI and the National Security Agency, issued a joint warning about the cyber threat to critical infrastructure such as energy and utilities, and so far, Ukraine and its supporters have kept cyber damage to a minimum. That doesn't mean the threat has become inconsequential, and Western governments and utilities are well advised to remain on alert." An Atlantic Council essay presents grounds for thinking that Norway's oil and gas production platforms in the North Sea may become targets in an expanded Russian campaign against European energy infrastructure. Those platforms experienced unexplained drone flybys last week, which the Council's essay regards as in some ways more disturbing than the sabotage of Nord Stream. The executive director of U.S. Cyber Command, David Frederick, described U.S. participation in Ukraine's cyber defense during his presentation at GovConWire's Cybersecurity and National Security Summit. He characterized the mission as a series of hunt-forward operations. The U.S. teams from the Cyber National Mission Force were dispatched to Ukraine late last year and worked with their Ukrainian counterparts to assess and secure critical IT and infrastructure networks. Frederick noted that in the course of operations, U.S. Cyber Command gained valuable insight into Russian methods of cyber war, much of which insight Cyber Command has shared not only with government partners like CISA and the FBI, but with the private sector as well. And finally, a Georgia man has been sentenced for his role in business email compromise and romance scams. The U.S. Department of Justice has announced that one Elvis Aosha Ogi Polor has been sentenced to 25 years for his role in a widespread ring of romance and business email compromise scams. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia says that Elvis opened and directed others to open at least 50 fraudulent business bank accounts that received over $9.5 million from various online frauds, including romance frauds and business email compromise scams. He then laundered the fraud proceeds using other accounts, including dozens of accounts overseas. The BEC operations were pretty routine. He and his 5 accomplices pretended to be organizational managers, directing employees to transfer money to accounts controlled by fraudsters. The romance scams were catfishing expeditions in which Elvis and his partners set up fictitious social media persona to induce the lovelorn to send him cash. At any rate, Elvis will now receive a sabbatical, courtesy of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Coming up after the break, Andrew Hammond from SpyCast speaks with hacker Eric Escobar about the overlap of traditional intelligence and cybersecurity. Our guest is AJ Nash from ZeroFox with an update on the current threat landscape. Stick around. And now, a word from our sponsor, Recorded Future. Staying one step ahead of the rapidly evolving threat landscape requires a constant flow of daily intelligence. To stay up to date on everything happening in the world of cybersecurity, join over 50,000 other security professionals who subscribe to the Cyber Daily. With daily email updates on the latest cybersecurity news, top threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more, the Cyber Daily is the first thing security professionals check every morning. To learn more and subscribe for free, go to recordedfuture.com/cyber-daily. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. And now, a word from our sponsor, Collide. Collide is an endpoint security solution that uses the most powerful untapped resource in IT, end users. Legacy device management tools like MDMs force disruptive agents onto employee devices that slow performance and treat privacy as an afterthought. Collide does things differently. Instead of forcing changes, Collide notifies your team via Slack when their devices are insecure and gives them step-by-step instructions to solve the issue. Collide can help you build a culture where everyone contributes to security because everyone understands how and why to do it. For IT admins, Collide provides a single dashboard that lets you monitor the security of your entire fleet, whether they're running on Mac, Windows, or Linux. That visibility makes it easier to prove compliance to your auditors, customers, and leadership. You can meet your compliance goals by putting users first. Visit collide.com/CyberWire Daily to find out how. That's KOLIDE.com/CyberWire Daily. And we thank Collide for sponsoring our show. Cybersecurity and reputation management company ZeroFox recently shared their threat landscape report for the second quarter of 2022, outlining some of the trends they're tracking. AJ Nash is Vice President of Intelligence at ZeroFox.
As a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the ongoing conflict and world response to that and sanctions, there's been a real challenge for criminals in getting money. And that's always a bit of a challenge for them anyway. The idea of committing a crime is one thing, but then finding a way to capitalize on that, to convert that into money is a bit of a challenge, but most of them have systems in place. And thanks to sanctions and thanks to changes in the financial systems that came from those, there's been some real struggle there. And to see that reflected, to see known Russian-speaking actors' frustrations over that and how they've been trying to deal with that, I found to be really, really interesting. It's a fascinating thing to watch unfold.
Does that create any kind of pivot from them? Do they shift to something else?
They have been working on that. So one of the pivots we've seen is a shift to just other countries. So Dubai, for instance, in United Arab Emirates, is a popular destination now. Just setting up accounting over there and trying to move money there and then figure out a way to get back. But the challenge is a lot of these folks want to get the money back into Russia, to support themselves, their families, et cetera. And it's that transfer that's really, really hard. So you're seeing more peer-to-peer transfers. It's not the same, but it reminds me a bit of the Hawala system in the Middle East of just, finding ways to move money that are outside of the standard financial systems, because SWIFT is a problem for the Russians right now too. So listen, as we all know, criminals are creative. They'll find a way, but it's making it hard for them, no doubt about it. And there's frustrations, and that adds to frustration with their own government and with what's going on. There's plenty of cyber criminals, like, criminals anywhere really. They're not necessarily political, like some can be, but a lot just want to make the money. And this is just a real big inconvenience for them, frankly. Yeah. But they're working around it. They're finding ways. It's just harder and it's costing them more money. It's taking more time and energy.
What other things in the report grabbed your attention?
There were some interesting pieces. The initial access broker marketplace, we've been following that quarter over quarter. We report on that, and that's been a really big issue. We saw a dip in Q1, and then Q2 we started seeing a resurrection. Not quite to the previous levels, but I suspect we'll continue to see it grow. This is an ongoing tactic that works really well. People get access to organizations, and then they're turning around and selling that to somebody else. It's essentially a middleman. Hey, we'll get access, we'll get in. We're not going to actually do the exploiting and take advantage of it necessarily, but we'll sell it off to somebody else to do it. So that's growing. That's a continuing threat. Some things we saw that you would expect. Malware is going to continue to be a problem and has. Ransomware continues to be a problem. These are very effective ways of causing problems for folks. So we've seen that. I think one of the things that I found interesting personally was a real notable increase in what we call Lnk shortcut files. So an Lnk shortcut is a shortcut. Lnk is just Microsoft terminology. So anybody sees a shortcut, you click on something to get to another document, et cetera. Seeing those and fake Windows 11 upgrades, which makes sense. Anytime there's a Windows upgrade, there'll be fake upgrades sent out. But seeing those Lnk shortcuts used to deliver malware, is a growing trend that I thought was really interesting because people still have a tendency to just click on things. So if it looks trustworthy, it's just an Excel document, it's just a Word document, it's just something somebody sent me. People still click on those, and that gained a lot of traction. So there's been a few really interesting things that have come out of it. And some that you would expect. Digital extortion continues to be a problem. As I said, ransomware and extortion go together. Extortion's a really effective and frankly really cheap methodology for an adversary. You don't actually have to do anything. You and I can go into the extortion business. I'm not recommending it, but it doesn't take a lot of effort, frankly. We can put together a form letter. We can send it out to a bunch of people and tell them they have to put money into a Bitcoin wallet, or we're going to release all this information we stole from them. And we don't have to steal anything from them. We don't even have to be technical. We don't have to be good. But we can send that threat out, and we see if you do that, people pay. There are people who, the fear is there, and if you set the price point low enough, large companies will say, you know what, just give them $500. I don't know if it's real or not, but it's too scary to figure out. And you do that at mass. You send out 1,000 of those things, you make a lot of money. So, I think that's a tactic I find very interesting to watch, because it's tough for prospective victims, for people who've been at least threatened, a lot of times to understand if they actually have been compromised. A lot of organizations really struggle with that. So when the threat comes in and it's scary and you're worried about having all your data released and possible brand damage, et cetera, a lot of organizations just want to pay it thinking that'll solve the problem, which it really doesn't. Either you didn't have a problem to begin with and you're paying somebody for nothing, or you may in fact have a problem, and you can't trust criminals not to follow through on extorting you. I promise, if you pay somebody extortion money, there's a reasonable chance they're going to come back and ask for more. That's been true in all of history for extortion. So
yeah,
I really enjoy the report, and I really enjoy what the team does because we get into those discussions about actors, specific groups, and motivations. And it's more interesting to me as a non-technical person than just reading a report after report after report about all these technical things, these IOCs. And don't get me wrong, those are important, and we have those in there for people that need to take action too. But I really enjoy, reading about what's going on in the criminal environments and what motivates actors and what they're talking about and why they're shifting to different techniques. So it makes for a really readable report for pretty much anybody, and really useful.
Yeah. Well, based on the information that you all have gathered here, what are your recommendations? How should people respond to the information you all have put out?
Yeah, it's a good question. Each of the sections, so our paper, we break it down into individual sections, right? Whether it's vulnerability exploitation or botnets or initial access brokers. And each section, we do provide recommendations per section. So we give people an opportunity to know, what does this mean and what can you do about it? And in many cases, the recommendations, quite honestly, are about vigilance and monitoring. But in some, there are specific examples of what people can do in terms of, updating policies or the CVE exploitations, for instance. We name the CVEs and we talk about what they are and what's being exploited and what patches can be put in place to make changes. So for each of the sections, there certainly is some actionability available. In some cases, a lot of it is just you really need to understand this. You need to set up monitoring. You need to set up alerting. A lot of times when we talk about what's going on in the cyber criminal the dark web, the underground, the cyber criminal marketplaces, a lot of that comes down to, are you seeing this yourself? But certainly some of it does come down to you're going to have the right resources available, whether it's in-house, whether it's third-party vendors. Some of the discussions in here are about, do you have the resources to know what's going on? The goal of Intel, aside from what I just said, the other goal of Intel is to be proactive. The goal is to move the needle to the left, right? In that whole right-left continuum of threats. You want to really get as far to the left as you can, and Intel is the only way to get there. Everything else, by definition, is reactive. Something's already happened to you, something's touched you, and that's fine. We do a lot of that too. There's no way around it. This is why it matters. This is what you can do about it. Those are the three components we talk about in building intelligence. But a lot of it is long-term. What can you do about it is make sure you have the awareness. You have the people, you have the technologies, you have the accesses to see what's going on, to see these trends, to know about what people are talking about and planning before it happens.
That's AJ Nash from ZeroFox. Andrew Hammond is host of the SpyCast podcast from the Spy Museum, and in a recent episode, he spoke with hacker Eric Escobar about the overlap of traditional intelligence and cybersecurity. Here's a part of that interview.
I was just wondering, just to start off, Eric, so you're a professional hacker. You attempt to compromise all different types of networks, from the military through to amusement parks. I guess one of the first questions that I had just when I was thinking about this interview, you've seen quite a lot. Is there anything that keeps you up at night? Is there anything in the wee small hours where you're like, that one really scares me?
The ones that really keep me up at night are anything to do with critical infrastructure, which is, obviously Colonial Pipeline and all the havoc that caused. Those are the ones that really just keep me up at night for a couple of reasons. I mean, really, if you look at any of our traditional, different internet uses, Amazon, Google, Apple, like all these different services, what's the worst that's going to happen? You might lose some files. You might need to recover from a backup. Your information might get out there. But with all the critical infrastructure, there's chance and potential for loss of life, which is way worse than anything that can happen in the cyber realm. So those are the ones like watching any critical infrastructure get compromised is really the thing that keeps me up at night because, lives are in the balance, lives are on the line. And we do a lot of testing for critical infrastructure. And I've seen computers and machines that have been online and not been taken offline longer than I've been alive.
At the Spy Museum, we have a shard from the Aurora generator test in 2007, which basically is a test to prove that a piece of code can affect the physical world. And basically, to cut a long story short, they blew up a generator. So something that's intangible can affect the tangible world. So that's ultimately what you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my actual job, is doing exactly that. Not too dissimilar. A couple weeks ago, we compromised an oil refinery. So that same exact, hey, we're able to access, industrial control systems. And if we touch the wrong computer, if we do something wrong, things go boom. And so that's why it's my fear, because exactly that code can affect the real world in those, in those circumstances.
When did it dawn on you that this is somewhere where you could distinguish yourself?
I don't think it has yet. Have you ever heard of Have you ever heard of Imposter Syndrome? Everybody feels like, I feel like they're an imposter to a degree. And for those in your audience listening, Imposter Syndrome is where you feel as if man, is somebody going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing? There was one time my wife, she walks in my office and she's like, are you just Googling how to do something for your job? And I'm like, absolutely. And she's like, what if your coworkers, found out, or, and so really to answer your question, some people might look at me and be like, wow, Eric is a great hacker. He compromises and breaks in all these large companies. And then I have the people that I look up to, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you could never call me a hacker compared to, these individuals that I've met and these individuals that I know, they're the real deal.
One of the things that I'm interested in is, with this field, SpyCast is on the CyberWire network now, and we've done traditional intelligence espionage, and people kind of get that more or less. Okay, that's over here, and then they sort of get cyber. They're like, okay, that's computers, that's over there. I'm increasingly interested in the places where they overlap. And it seems that, a lot of people are like, okay, well, the NSA, that's an area where, both of them overlap. And other than that, it gets a bit fuzzy and I'm not sure about it. But, when you hear the term InfoSec, information security, I mean, that's what a lot of what intelligence agencies do. Or when you were speaking about breaking in without using malware, it's intelligence agencies as well. Sure, you can do some kind of brute force attack and get information, but if you scream out that you've just done something, then they're going to go away and change all their codes and do a whole bunch of countermeasures to try to protect themselves against what you've just committed against them. So I don't want to say that both of them collapse into one another, but it just seems really interesting to me, all of the places that they overlap. And I don't know if I've ever read a book or something that adequately explains that overlap, but what do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, it's interesting when you think about it, so you mentioned, ways that they overlap. Really, it's just information. If you're a spy agency, if you're a nation state and you're trying to discern information, there's a lot of guesswork, a lot of educated guesswork that goes into that. And so an example that I always kind of like to think about realistically, if you look at, say, the United States political landscape, totally not a hot button issue. If you are a foreign, nation and you're trying to understand, hey, what are the political parties, angling to do? What's going on here? Well, think if they were able to break into, say, the, manufacturer of flags, right? Of little American flags that would get waved around at campaign rallies. Well, if you knew how many orders of each of those flags were going to respective, different political campaigns and parties and all that stuff. Well, now you've built up, just with that information, of orders of flags. If you're able to compromise a small manufacturing place, now you know all the ordering, all the processing information of how that goes, typically logistics of who, how, where, and why those flags are going to be in that position. You typically know how many are in the war chest or how many people they're expecting at a campaign rally, right? And so it's one of those things that it's information security, because you don't necessarily know how the information is going to be used. You might have a threat actor that breaks in trying to that same flag company, trying just to steal, email addresses so that they can send out, phishing emails just willy-nilly. Or you might have a nation state trying to compromise that same flag factory for the purpose of trying to divine what does the political landscape look like in the United States for the upcoming midterms. There's a lot of hypotheticals, and then there's a lot of where things actually overlap, like you said, with NSA and other intelligence agencies.
That's Andrew Hammond from the Spy Museum and host of the SpyCast podcast. You could hear the rest of this interview on the SpyCast here on the CyberWire network. This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by CrowdSec. CrowdSec helps rebalance the asymmetrical cybersecurity industry by making their open-source multiplayer firewall available to all for free. Once threats are identified, all users are notified to ensure everyone's protection. No matter what your business size, CrowdSec offers adaptive response to credential stuffing, port scans, password brute forcing, and much more. At CrowdSec, they have each other's backs and make the internet safer together. Visit crowdsec.net to learn more. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Eliana White, Peru Prakash, Liz Irvin, Rachel Gelfand, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Catherine Murphy, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Ivan, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And now, a word from our sponsor, AlertLogic. The defining characteristic of a managed detection and response service is its focus on delivering a meaningful security outcome, meant to ease both pre-breach and post-breach concerns. Maximum visibility and the ability to detect and respond to threats combines with capabilities to minimize the impact of vulnerabilities, configuration issues, and attacks. An effective MDR solution must address both. AlertLogic is the only MDR provider that delivers comprehensive coverage for public clouds, SaaS, on-premises, and hybrid environments. Their cloud-native technology and white-glove team of security experts protect your organization 24/7 and ensure you have the most effective response to resolve whatever threats may come. AlertLogic is the industry's first SaaS MDR provider with purpose-built technology and security experts that help identify and respond to cybersecurity breaches, providing complete compliance solutions that give customers peace of mind and deliver on best practices. Learn more about how AlertLogic's MDR can provide complete coverage for your most critical assets at alertlogic.com. That's alertlogic.com. And we thank AlertLogic for sponsoring our show.